Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on the Better You podcast. We are joined by Joseph Caputo, who has a very interesting background. He's a former actor and writer, currently working as a dental hygienist and karate instructor, and also running for Congress in Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes, that's right.
and going to law school.
Yes, that's right.
We're also joined by our producer, Liam Bailey, who's actually Hallie's brother, but he was just really excited about this and wanted to be a part of it. So we're kind of bringing him in for this discussion. Um, and then, as always, Robbie and Allie are with us. So without anything further, let's get into it. I mean, my my biggest question, my first question is, how do you do it all? How do you transition? I mean, I personally have undergone kind of the transition from the artist lifestyle to the more 9 to 5 business oriented lifestyle. And so I'm always interested in talking to people about what that looks like because I think everybody has their own take on it. They have their own, like, hey, this is why I did it, and you know, going back and all of that.
Well, how do I manage it all? The short answer is I'm not sure if I am, right? Like you take each day as you can and you strategize each week and you have each goal for each month and you can really be married to your calendar and be staring at it all the time. Um, in regards to law school, that's no easy task. Dentistry is a difficult field. I'm actually an assistant rather than a hygienist, and the main difference between that is they have more school and I make less money. So money's a factor, right? And even as an actor and a writer, I'm proud of the work I've done, not insulting that career, but I never made union status. It's a hard gig to break into. So it was never something where I wasn't working a 9 to 5. So spending years working my job and then trying to build my career and enjoying it, but that meant I got used to 15 to 17-hour days, right? Because you're going to the show at night or you're saying, I've got 4 hours on a Friday night. We crack open a beer or make a tea and work on this script, right? Or work on this shot that I'm imagining, reach out to this person. So the workload is in some ways like the duration of the day, something I'm used to. I come from a group of people who, they're plumbers and teachers and nurses. And so, the work ethic was distilled into me. So that's not even I'm kind of used to that part, but it's the
Yeah.
moving pieces. It's, what, I have an exam today at 6 o'clock. So I studied and I'm doing this and I'm going to study and it's just, you get used to it. But right, mental health is a moving target, isn't it? Right. So you try and balance things, but things come along to knock you off balance and then you have to re-engage. So how do I transition? I don't know. I commute a lot. So I go to school in New York City, but I live in
Mhm.
Connecticut. It's about a 45, 50-minute drive, no traffic. There will be traffic. I can't afford the tolls, so I take the train, which I also kind of can't afford. This stuff's getting expensive. So I have 2 hours on a train with very sloppy Wi-Fi. So I've learned at certain stations where I can plan a political post or where I can download something for school. But I try and pre-plan it. I'll make things in my notes when there's no Wi-Fi. I'll study offline because I know that I'm going to freak out. I'm going to crash out if I'm reading this book and I'm getting ready for school and I lose it. Or if I make this post and it dies, I don't want to do that again. So the transitioning is something that is, in one sense, sort of a soft science I'm still discovering.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, it's like I'm just ready for the next fight at all times. And you make it work, right? Like, you have to eat, you have to put gas in your car, you have to pay rent. Like, so a part of me just treats everything I do like that. It's got to get done. I'm going to do it. And if I have enough energy to have a genuine smile, I'm going to try and enjoy doing it. Um, but yeah, it's a constant thing. I have a lot of friends in the city. I've spent maybe
Mhm.
2 years living without a lease, essentially in New York. Sometimes going back and forth between Stanford, right? Pet sitting, house sitting, right? But for the most part, I commute, and having those 4 hours to commute, it you got to make the time. So there might be days where after work, I'm like, I've slept 3 hours each night for a week, and I crash, I die, I sleep because I know I'm making it to
Mhm.
Grand Central. The hardest part about transitioning is knowing what you need. Sometimes you need rest. Sometimes you need to give that extra oomph. How do you manage burnout? Right. So, the too long didn't read version of that is who knows? And you just learn on the go.
So you brought up something that we've touched on here before, but I find really fascinating, and I think um, it's become part and parcel with the human experience, at least in the US, I think. And like I call it basically this idea of active adaptation,
Mm.
where the world is kind of is it's coming at you so quickly and everything is changing and there's so much expected of all of us. And if we want to, it very much feels like if we want to stay in control of our own destinies, in control of our own lives, we're in a situation where we constantly have to be evolving and adapting and accepting new realities and understanding how to live in those new realities. Um, and it's tough. And I see on the other side of it, I see a lot of people just being like, no, I'm not going to do that. This
Yeah.
is this is good enough. I am not happy with, but I will accept kind of the slow descent into wherever I'm heading. Um, and from a personal perspective, that it drives me nuts because like
Yeah.
I see it on so many people in so many things where they're just like, yeah, whatever, this is what it is, whatever. Um, but from a mental health perspective, like it makes sense. Like learned helplessness is a thing. You
Yeah.
know, I learned about that in psychology 101 in high school,
Yeah.
Um, and as a most of that was just me commenting on what you said. But the question part of it is as as a person, as a congressional candidate, how do you how do you reconcile that with your experience and the kind of task that you've essentially undertaken on yourself of saying, okay, well, it's up to me to hopefully make things better for us.
Hi everyone, I'm Allie Bailey, and now a quick word from us.
Howie Mandel here. Do you ever feel like you're just another ticket in a long line, especially when you're looking for help with something as personal as your own mental health? Lamco Wellness is bringing the human connection back to mental health care. It starts with a personalized intake process where they get to know you. They offer medication management that's actually managed, coordinating with you and your clinician to make sure you're both empowered and on the right track. It comes down to three things: personal connection, compassion, and absolute privacy. Stop being another number and head over to lamcowellness.com to take the first step.
Well, part of it comes down to positive psychology, right? When I was in
Mhm,
my psychology 101 days, right? Like when I first started getting into this, I started reading a lot of books by Eric Fromm, who's a
mhm.
positive psychologist. I see a bunch of head shakes. That makes me so excited, right? Brilliant guy, little ahead of his time, little behind our time, right? There's a couple of things he said where I'm like, close, buddy, but I don't know. But one of the things, he wrote two books that really resonated with me. It started me off as a person, as a like 19, 21-year old. It started me off politically. One was called Escape from Freedom, and the other was called The Sane Society. In Escape from Freedom, he basically has a hypothesis. And he says, listen, between freedom and security, we're almost always going to choose security as human beings. We have cognitive dissonance. We don't like that, but we do it. And then in The Sane Society, he kind of waxes poetic and says, based on that, here's how you can diagnose a macroorganism as sane or insane. Here's how we can look at sanity within civilizations, right? Is a society healthy to its members? So I recognize this by looking at that first bit, which is that freedom or security. It is the secure thing to not ask that person out, to not run the risk of rejection. It is the secure thing to not apply for that job. It is the secure thing to not take certain risks. And yet, freedom is life affirming, right? It is not the safe thing for me to not deviate because I'm running my campaign in conjunction with school. But many people express concerns to me, and they're not unsubstantiated that, hey, you're splitting your focus. I'm not. It's so directly tethered, but that makes sense to me because I'm experiencing it.
Mhm.
A lot of people would look at that decision to run a campaign while going to school as an insecure decision. It is a
Mhm.
decision that hurts my level of security, right?
Mhm.
So I think when it comes to managing a personal life, right, as well as a campaign, we look at these things that are a freedom choice, this choice to take a risk, this choice to live well, this choice to say, I'm going to bloom today.
Mhm.
And that temptation to say, no, I don't want to cross into that valley and see what's there. The river is here, the farm animals are here, family is here, right? That age of exploration stuff that I don't need to know. There could be demons there. No, I'm going to choose security. So in all of us, we have that. We pay lip service to freedom as a concept, and I mean freedom for real, not like the political. People make that
Yeah,
word
yeah.
mean a lot of things. Our personal freedom, our ability to make these decisions that are life affirming. That's what I'm trying to do with my campaign, and I do run into people who aren't either ready or don't want it. I think people have an innate drive to want to put down roots and feel safe.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
all of us have had that taken from us, especially our generation. I'm looking at all of our faces, and we all seem pretty young. We've lived through however many 2008s and 1999s and 2012s. And, we've lived in 20 different versions of the United States since we were born. We know that reality is an ever collapsing and unfolding thing. So I think
Yeah.
that what happens is people will reject a level of freedom because they want to build a security they've been denied. And I think that they don't need to be a duality. We can choose freedom to get security, right? We can take the risk and now we own the house, right? But that's going to bring a different thing. So it's mobile. In running the campaign, I've noticed that people really just want to feel safe. And my goal is to help them feel safe,
Mhm.
no matter where they are, no matter what their socioeconomic status, no matter what they vote as. People want to feel safe because if you don't feel safe, you don't want to take the risk, the self affirming, life affirming risk of choosing the free thing. I'm not going to take that class and spend that money if I'm worried about food, whatever that is. And every single one of us has had to make that calculus, every single one. So I won't elaborate because I want you to fill in that blank. We've all done that. So,
So,
Actually, I have a question for Ali on the other side as we go through Joe's story and his timeline of day to day, right? Do you think, like, and Aaron mentioned too, like adapting to things for human nature is sometimes impossible. But like in your research and in your studies, do you think is that possible for everyone? Can you change a human psychology to make that person be okay to adapt to a change or like become, just a self-motivating person?
Yeah, and I think change for anyone can be difficult. I mean, in mental health, we do see different things. Like, for example, like as a clinician, sometimes if somebody's went through a lot of changes over a very short period of time, like we might say, hey, like, let's talk about adjustments, right? Because even though sometimes we are doing things for the greater good for ourselves, we are adjusting to changes maybe quite frequently. But as Joe's mentioning today in our discussion, you know, there's those times where maybe there's what we would say like negative experiences where we're not comfortable with certain changes that are beyond our control. But there's also those ones where we're a little bit anxious about, right? Like, for example, I'm anxious to take that course, because maybe I'll fall behind a little bit on finances to be able to afford groceries for myself. But I think it's up to the person and also having maybe those resources and primary supports in place, essentially to get into the next stage. And just to kind of also chime in, Joe, I know you wear many hats, and it's very awesome. I think it's great everything that you're doing. And something that I ask, since you are doing quite a few things, and it's okay if you don't have a direct answer for this. I wouldn't expect you to, but um, let's say something happens, right? Like, yes, when we're in school, we're dedicated the next 3 to 5 years or so, within our studies. But, let's say something happens on the personal end, something that would formulate a distraction maybe to us in our endeavors. Like, how do you kind of come back from that when you're in such a high stress and continued environment? Like, do you take a step back and kind of let yourself heal from something, or do you feel like you can kind of work through it while you're on that endeavor?
This actually to kind of touches to the heart of something I'm currently going through, right? There've been a couple of, let's just say, Department of Justice releases that I may have read that I found disturbing. I mean, just anyone writing that, let alone doing it, I found emotionally bothersome. It's taken my focus. I spoke to my therapist today about it. And, whether it is something personal, whether it's empathy, because we live in a 24-hour environment of just information, even if it's something like this storm. We just had a huge snowstorm up north, and I believe down in Florida, you all got hit with some pretty cold temperatures as well. Iguanas are dropping from the sky. Like, we do get knocked off kilter, and oftentimes it's outside of our control. How do we adapt to a non-adaptable environment? How do we take a punch we cannot block? Um, the reality is sometimes you do have to take a step back, but the proper thing is always to feel it. I mean, that there are very few always never statements I believe in, but we need to create an environment, a pocket environment, even if we can, where we give ourselves space to feel these things. And we might have to do that multiple times. We can't just be efficient and say, "Oh, this is going to be one and done. Everything my dad ever did to me or mom or whatever situation, I'm gonna carve out 3 hours on Monday, and I'm just gonna." We can't. We're humans. Like, we have to find our inner biorhythm, our inner emotional calendar, and then we have to respect and treasure those emotions and give that space. I hope that directly answered the question. I've found
Yes.
sometimes I indirectly answer things, and I don't mean to be dodgy. I'm just trying to include everything. But we have to feel it. And sometimes that does mean taking a step back or slowing down. And, whether it's with your workout or with your schoolwork, maybe you're not giving 100%. Maybe your 100% that day is 40%. But you're doing the emotional labor, and that's valid. And you got to do it, you know?
You spoke about something that resonates with me because it's a conversation I have with my wife all the time about uh, our generation. The millennials and Gen Z who are starting to intermesh because there's some shared experiences now.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, I kind of, on one hand, I subscribe to the Adam Conover thing of like everything's the same, it's just different.
Yeah.
Like the problems with it's all the same, it's just a little bit different, and we're raising the same issues and all that. And I understand that, and I think on a level he's right. But for for me, for a lot of I think millennials, um, we we grew up in a society that was good. Like there were issues, but overall everything uh was good. And then we kind of had this successive series of, oh wait, things are not good. And I
Mm,
think that for me personally, and I have quite a few friends that kind of echo this, we looked at the things that weren't what we wanted to see, that were going wrong, as it were. And I think that we trusted that somebody else has this.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is entirely conjecture on my part, I think that that trust essentially eroded, and what we were left with as a generation is kind of this recognition that it's, as Tupac said, it's on us to do what we have to do to survive.
Yeah.
Um, and but uh, that's an extreme pivot from everything's going to be okay to okay, we got to do what we have to do to survive. And I think people understandably, based off of their life experiences, their own personal core beliefs, whatever, they come up with different solutions to the problems that I think are
Mm.
we're all facing. But I also see the other side of that. Everybody's coming up with their own solutions.
Yeah.
Everybody's very passionate about things because now we're in survival mode. You
Yes.
know, we're all in this sense of like we have to do something, we have to achieve something, we have to, which is great because it's very motivating, but
Yeah.
it's also I think damaging to us personally and to us as a society because survival mode is fight or flight.
Yeah.
Where everything is either attack or run away. There's no, long-term thought there. Um,
Yeah.
and sorry, this is a really long lead up to
No,
I think a
please.
very short question, but that to me has in my own family and in the family of friends and loved ones, it erodes the family support system
Yeah.
because what I see is a lot of people kind of digging their heels in on their solution, on their beliefs, on their guy or person or whatever, and nobody. It's just, oh, we don't talk about this anymore. Like I have a brother-in-law who's like, no, 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 I have my opinions, but we just won't talk about it. But like his family is just at war politically
Yeah.
with things, and that I think that's become something that all of us deal with is just the division and having to deal with the politics of the people that we love otherwise, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
As a politician, somebody running for office, how do you personally reconcile that difficulty? Because you're not just saying this is what I believe in, you're saying this is what I believe in, and I'm going to attempt to advance that on a larger scale.
There were so many good things you said that I want to react to, and I don't want to sound dodgy to the question. So I'm just going to outline it in my head for a minute. Um, I believe most issues are nonpartisan. I believe a lot of what we want is the same. We all want our kids to be okay, or if we don't have kids, we want to at least feel safe to think about having them. We all want to flourish. We all want to bloom. And to credit what you were saying earlier, no matter how different a lot of our childhoods were, I don't know if society was good, but I think we were allowed to kind of have safe childhoods. And whether we came to the fight or flight when the Twin Towers hit or when Keiko from Free Willy died, like these moments would happen. But the modern generations are constantly jacked into the news and asking where Uncle Who or Aunt This is and not seeing them anymore. And they're watching their holidays split apart and they're watching people not talk. I was raised very, very Republican, and I'm running as a left wing candidate. There are a lot of my family members who think I'm kind of a traitor. But in reality, it's both the Republicanism and the left wingism that are informing my desire to affirm well being for all. So the way I'm trying to manage this with this campaign is I say very specifically, and I believe it, everything's going to be okay because we're going to make it okay. And it's not the okay that's the active word there. It's the make. If all five of us are working the same job and we're all like, well, we're not going to talk about money. Well, now we four boys here are paid a little more than Allie. That's not fair. But if we don't talk about it, we can't rectify it. So now she's living silently into violence. That's not fair. And that's nonpartisan, right? Both sides can agree that that ain't cool. So I think what has to happen is we need to start getting extremely comfortable in uncomfortable conversations. If I go to a therapist and I just don't talk about the real stuff, I didn't really go to therapy. If I don't talk about religion or spirituality with my elders, I might not learn the benefit of what they learned. And maybe the benefit of what they learned is what I discard because it's not relevant to me, to my generation. But we need to make that intergenerational bond to do that. If we don't talk about politics, I might not learn that Liam's going through something as someone who's a little younger than me. When I was 19 and started going out for work, people used to say, oh yeah, just apply in person. You know how stupid you look? Everyone keeps saying, go apply online. It's just not the right advice anymore. And it's not even their fault. They're looking out for you. But if we don't talk, whether it's religion, politics, tactics, policy, a nervous system under stress is going to have a reaction. If you're a martial artist and you train that reaction, you have a discipline. But if you don't train that, you just have a reaction, and a reaction can be predicted, monetized, and primed. If we don't have these talks together, we all become these Manchurian candidates for whoever's in power, and we disempower our ability to love each other. I want to make sure everyone in my sightline is okay because that's who I can touch. I can hug you like you exist in my world. I don't want you to feel unsafe coming to family dinner. So I've had a lot of really uncomfortable conversations with family, and there are a lot of times where they don't want to talk about it. And a lot of my family don't ask how my campaign is going because then I think in a lot of ways I'm taking the lessons I was taught as a young Republican to protect everybody. And along the way, that became, I think, a little more exclusionary than I ever interpreted it. So I know I promised not to talk about ideological stuff, but I think for the purpose of this question, it's nonpartisan, the ideological stuff. We have to talk about things that scare us, right? I have cousins who are different genders than me, right? Like, I don't know what it's like to be a woman in the world. But if they ask me that question, I know what it's like to be a man in the world. Now we're talking about something that, no offense, boys, we could have great conversations, but it's not going to go that way. We're just going to get different value. We're going to intuit different experiences. So I'm trying to manage that as best I can. But we have to start talking to each other, and we have to start talking respectfully as people who love each other. There's an expression I've heard people talk about when couples argue, and the expression is fight me like I'm someone you love. Don't fight me to win. Don't fight me because we're fighting and just repeating what other people have told us, whether that's a newscaster, or mom or dad, or childhood trauma. Fight me like I'm someone you love, and we're going to resolve this dispute and move forward together. That's the trick. And I think if we don't have intergenerational conversation and interfamilial conversation beyond all these divides, we're just going to make ourselves our own oppressors, right? It's the unresolved trauma with dad that makes you, do things, or unresolved trauma with your mother. You don't even realize how that actually affects your reason, how you reason through a puzzle, whether you're securely attached or not, who you're going to associate with out of vibes. Vibes are just unconscious decision. Like, you're not, I can talk about spirituality, but the reality is vibes is much more unconscious psychology sometimes than spirituality, right? So we have to have these discussions. And sometimes that also means knowing when not to have them, making sure it's a safe environment to raise the issue. And I hope that we start doing it as a nation because we have so much more in common. We really do. I think when we get past the rage, which rage is just love in disguise, anger doesn't exist on its own. It's tethered to something. It's because I'm afraid. It's because I love something. It's because I want to protect it. When we strip away all these things with loving conversation, you're left with people. And people want things to work out.
I saw you wanted to say something, or you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah. So for me, basically, just a little bit of a background, right? We all know, like, what the boomers kind of are, and kind of we know what to expect when we talk to like a baby boomer, right? But with like Gen X, it was a lot of like, you look at a lot of like movies like Office Space and stuff. It's like, what is my purpose? I feel like society's kind of falling down. People aren't staying married like they used to, right? I don't know if I have a purpose, and I don't know if I'm going to find my wife, but I'm going to try. And that was Gen X. With millennials, I feel like they kind of saw the house burning, but they're like, "Hey, it's gonna be okay. I just got to push through it." And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like with Gen Z, the house is burned down. We're coming through the ashes, and we're like, "Okay, who's at fault for this?" And I
Yep.
feel like that's where a lot of the kind of aggression is kind of coming from nowadays. And my question is, when creating a campaign, how do you speak to all of those voices and address all those grievances?
Well, I think the first step is listening, right? I mean, I filed my campaign in July, but I've been alive since December 92. And always there have been people. Can I swear here? Is it discouraged?
Not the big ones, the
Fair.
the light ones.
The light ones. I love that. People bitch, people complain, people piss and moan. Like I remember being 6 and people talking about things that bothered them. And then you grow up and you're like, okay, I was 6. That was 99, 2000, Office Space, right? Like 2001, I think was Office Space. You recontextualize your memories to further empathize with what that generation was going through. I'm fortunate. Both my parents were Gen X, but my mother was 18 and my father was 22. So I was kind of raised X for the first like 7 years of my life. And then I became a millennial. I don't know. I first heard the term millennial in 2014. So I kind of rebelled against that label, whatever. But like, I was the right age for the prequel trilogy and for Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. So like, I felt like the world was my oyster. Lincoln Park was out to DBZ edits. Life was good. I didn't have a lot of friends, but whatever. Do I just get hyper nostalgic over that? An era that wasn't perfect for me? No. I can't live there. That ended. That house burned down. So I think when it comes to this, right, this intergenerational thing, we just have to start listening, right? If Gen Z says, yo, this is why we're mad at you millennials, I can be like, I can sit here all day and be like, well, we're fighting. Look at us. But maybe Gen Z does have a point somewhere. Maybe they don't know how to articulate it or I don't know how to understand it. But there's a reason that dialogue needs to happen and there's a resolution that can happen. I think Gen Z, millennials, and even the tail end of Gen X all dealt with very similar levels of raging against the machine, disempowerment. Millennials were given, if you bootstrap, right? If you work hard, you can escape the burning house. If you run fast enough, if you're strong enough to take a few people with you, you can be fine. Gen Z was like, well, we just saw that didn't work. What's going to work? We're all looking for that strategy, that discipline to wrap around the reaction. And I think the only way out is going to actually take a little bit from what each generation has learned and actually engineer or sculpt together a methodology that will, bring about something better for everybody. We live in our own lives day to day. We construct that and we can make choices based on agency. But, I'm only so smart as one being. But if I take, the 20 different things that these very different elders said, and I listen to the youth and I put it all together, now I'm thinking as a symphony and not an instrument. That's powerful. I would much rather walk through the world a library than a book. So, I try to listen and just not immediately shrug off what someone tells me, even if I don't like how it sounds, because there might be some wisdom in there. It's coming from learned experience. And sometimes that means you're doing a lot more of the work on the front end, but it's worth it on the back end.
I mean, as a as a person that went through this as a millennial, kind of my first uh, touch of like I remember if things might not be great uh, moving forward was actually Columbine. It was well before the 9/11. It was well
Yeah.
before I remember Columbine and kind of I was already kind of a angry, upset pre-adolescent at that time, but uh, I remember coming home and just being sent home from school, and then that was going on, and um, there were you're a kid and you hear about there's these two kids who basically are just so fed up they're just committing random violent acts of murder against anybody that they don't like or whatever. And that was, for me at the time, that was a new idea. Like I understood violence, I understood hate, I understood all of those things, but they were always rooted in the desire to get something. Or, somebody prevents you from getting something you want. Oh, I hate this person, whatever.
Yeah.
And this was just the the expression of intense violent hate. And like at the time that blew my mind, but I also realize now as an adult in hindsight that that wasn't that wasn't an isolated incident. Like we all thought that that was an isolated incident. We all approached Klebold and Harris, I believe were their names, as if they were these extreme outliers that would never happen again. But in a sense, and don't get me wrong, I 100% believe that what they were doing was wrong. But in a sense, for a lot of people who felt pushed down, dejected, angry, and having no outlet, that seemed like a reasonable solution, which is,
Yeah.
in my opinion, part of the reason why mass shootings are so much more common today. As as not just a politician, but as a person, because I question myself on this. How do you speak to a group or a generation that is so disheartened, that is so angry, that random acts of violence are like, yeah, okay, cool,
Yeah.
we're good with this, or at least we're desensitized to it, like it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a combat veteran. I tried to join the military. They didn't want me. Right. I tried to get autism waivers and all sorts of waivers. I have no reason to be as desensitized to violence as I am. I've experienced fistfights. I've experienced life or death situations. I've been stabbed. I've had guns drawn on me, but I'm not a combat veteran. I have not
Mhm.
seen my friends get harmed. I have not caused serious harm to another human being. It is unconscionable how used to the violence we've all become. Every time I sit in a movie theater, every time I go to a church, I'm mapping exits like I'm a trained agent. It's just like, whatever. Yeah, no, that's it. Oh, cool. Yep. Like always, it's there. How do I speak to people? There's an African proverb that says that the child that is unloved by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And part of what makes Columbine specifically so brutal is that humans can be very creative, but not very inventive when they're emotional. And right now, and I partially blame the media for the clickbait of it, but humans will copycat kill. We've had an increase in church bombings and theater shootings, and it's because a lot of these people who feel unloved or disenfranchised. Maybe it's because systemically, politically, as a society, we don't put as much value as mental health as we should, which I think we can all agree that we should have a much more robust mental health aspect to our society, a much more robust recipient system. Part of it is that people see it. and they go, I identify what that being is feeling. Now they're getting immortalized. Everyone's talking about them. And then they go do it. So I speak to people about this by saying that you have to love people well and often and early. These people are not, they didn't just wake up and go nuts, right? These are not, these are probably people who aren't even, there's a nature nurture idea, right? We like to say something's wrong with their brain. No, like sometimes people are pushed to this. It's the Anakin Skywalker syndrome. There were warning signs. And no matter how much you might love Annie, he did a lot of things wrong, even before he was a hero. We could have predicted, isolated, and tried to heal him before this. So I speak to people on this by encouraging a preventative model, right? If you create safe environments, if you have good catches, right? Like good safety nets, if you affirm human life, if you don't celebrate these people, you and I right now very easily can find the names of any school shooter, and it's a little harder to find the names of the victims. That is a deliberate political choice, and I don't like that. So I speak to people like this in this way. It's messy, it's chaotic. I've imagined what would happen to me a million times. I imagine all of you have as well. We live in it. It's a reality. We have to create a system that does not celebrate this and that actually is willing to do the hard work of talking with children about their emotions, making them feel loved and a part of a society. Because right now, when we're all feeling far more disenfranchised, far more hopeless, far less connected to community, and then we see the normalization of violence every single day on our phone screens, a lot of people are probably going to try and join that copycat club who otherwise could not commit these heinous violences, not be forced into a level of environmental sociopathy, forced into these extreme stress points. The child that is alone goes feral. And you can be surrounded by a lot of people and you can be alone. I think that we need to do a better job of finding people early who are feeling unloved and showing them that there can be a better future. Um, Everything that's happened with any of these shooters could have been solved in middle school or elementary school or preschool or at home. And that's not to say that, I agree with what they're doing or understand what they're doing. It's not to say that people who do these things shouldn't be punished. But I believe in prevention. And I think that we have to start focusing on prevention rather than reconciliation or punishment. Long-winded answer, but I don't prepare these things, right? Like I'm not a politician that has talking points. I'm a dude who you talk to at the pub and we wax poetic. So I apologize that I can be long-winded, but
No, no worries. I mean, I think we live in interesting times. My aunt has this I guess blessing that she will say often of may we live in uninteresting times. And you know, the reality is we live in interesting times. History is being made every day. It's just kind of shaping everything and honestly it is for I think most of us on some level hard to keep up. And I think that this is just kind of me on my soapbox now. Uh, I think that the the stress of seeing all of this, the stress of seeing the polarization, the stress of kind of going, I don't know where things are going to shake out, um, has an impact on all of us, on our decision making abilities, on our ability to kind of evaluate what's happening, and we tend to think from a they call it system one thinking of
mm,
immediate responsive reflexive uh, thought. And to me, I think that we're in a place that really requires deep reflection, uh, self-acknowledgement, things of that nature, which is why, we have this podcast talking about mental health, because mental health, I think, is the core of what we all need in order to collectively find a way out of the situation that we've found ourselves in. Liam, I know you had another question you wanted to ask.
Oh yeah. So one thing I want to ask, just because of your background, you know, on another episode we had, which by the way, for people watching, you can see that episode right here, for disenfranchised grief. One of our experts was just talking about how grief isn't just like, hey, my goldfish died. It's like it could be like you're grieving a town that you used to live in, or like a thing you used to do, or a time period, right? But for this question specifically, I know that you used to be very, very much, like you said, trying to break into the arts, and you did a lot of great work there. And now you're going very heavy into the campaign, becoming a lawyer and politics and the like. Do you ever catch yourself kind of grieving that lifestyle, especially to considering that you're traveling a lot to New York, and before that was kind of where you were very much pursuing a different kind of thing?
Yeah, somewhat. Thank you for that question because no one's ever asked me that on the campaign trail. There's definitely an aspect we all have to go through as we continue. We're all very young here, but like we're old enough, right? You have to grieve the people you were, grieve the times, right? Like I've already have a ton of people from my high school who are dead, right? Like you grieve the ones who did not make it, and you grieve the memories. But from my own life perspective, I've had to grieve certain elements of my life. I don't grieve that, partially because when it came to the concept of duty, I've almost always leaned towards duty. So even in my acting, I didn't apply for certain commercials. I didn't, I've always was a conscientious objector in certain situations, and I still do things. I'm a lifelong martial artist. I did not become a union stunt person yet. Selfish plug, I will try and get on Daredevil eventually. But every now and again, I do get a phone call, and they're like, "Hey, we just need a body who can die," and I'll go make some non-union or stage or film money and start building that. But now I do that once or twice or thrice or whatever a year, rather than I really want to do this as my full-time job. I feel that my answer to your question is less in managing grief and more in managing addiction. There are times where I'll see a play and I'll be like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I want some of that." There are times where I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm coming back from New York late at night. Call time used to be 6 o'clock. That's when class starts. I miss the life." I do sometimes have that moment of like, I should write a poem right now. I should call my friends on my day off. I don't want to work on school. I want a lightsaber fight. It's more of a jubilant thing than a grief, but I certainly understand people who grieve because the arts are hard right now. We had the pandemic and the strike, and now a lot of companies are consolidating. So if you made the wrong Facebook post, quote unquote, 8 years ago, you don't get the job. Even if you're the best audition, if the other person has 20, 30,000 more followers. I think Maya Hawke, who's famously the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman, brilliant in her own right. If her parents weren't who they were, she would be brilliant, brilliant artist. She's flat out admitted, with her pedigree, with her training, with her skills, with her lineage, there are still people who get jobs over her. So I feel like others probably have more of a right to answer your question from the grief component because it is an incredibly difficult environment politically, economically to choose the arts. And I kind of never unchose the arts. I definitely go back a little, but now it's to take a punch rather than to do Shakespeare. But yeah, I've always leaned towards duty, so that I don't grieve it as much because I kind of really knew as I was making the choice that I was ready for that choice.
Wanted to bring it back to what you had mentioned earlier about listening. I feel like listening is not something that you are born with. It's a skill that you learn by experience in life, right? So questions for Ali and you at the same time is there when you are listening to a person speaking and you have all these voices in your head, how do you manage in terms of, okay, this is something I need to answer and this is something I should stray away from getting my emotions up too high, right? And then Ali, on your end, um, how can a person become a good listener? Is there something in our psychology in the brain that we can dig into to make us a better listener? Because like in terms of what everything that was mentioned, where you're having a conversation with family members, um, there is no point of that conversation and an energy that you bring to that conversation when the other person is just not listening, um, and it doesn't register in their head. So yeah.
Ali,
Yeah,
can we
and
listen to
then
you first? Oh, sorry.
sure. No, that's okay. Thank you. No, I was gonna say, especially when it comes to, well, let's kind of take it back, I guess. When it comes to listening, I mean, people have different body language sometimes to let you know that they are, listening. I think that can be different for everybody, right? Like for me, I also, wear many hats. So sometimes, like if I'm writing an email and somebody is sitting with me in my personal life, that one might not think, and Liam can probably attest to this, one might not think I'm listening to them, but I'm absorbing everything. I'm like a sponge. However, when it comes to professionally, right, like in whatever field or endeavor that we're in, we might have a different form of listening. So I remember when I first went into grad school, and this kind of goes into a side story, so I apologize, but I had one professor who, and I look up to him. He's awesome. He actually is like a diehard Buffalo Bills fan. So shout out to him because he was awesome and very personable with us as our small cohort. But he would almost, I don't want to say redirect us back into psych terms, but he would basically say, I'm hearing you saying this, and really show that he was actively listening to us. Now, going into grad school, I mean, I spoke clinically. However, I didn't speak as clinically as him, but I think it's a lifestyle, um, letting people know that you do hear them, identifying reflective statements and summarizing what somebody says shows that you are listening to them and absorbing it. I've had many friends, who I may not have spoken with in a very, very long time. And this kind of goes between professional and personal, but hopefully this is answering your question, Ravi, on my end. But, I don't have to talk to people on a regular basis to remember things that they've told me. I can recall things from a very, very long time or a short time ago. And again, I think it's up to the eye of the beholder of, how you communicate with someone. But if you feel though that it's difficult to listen, right? If you feel like it's like a social challenge to be able to say, okay, like I heard somebody saying something, but it didn't really absorb with me. I always say, if you feel uncomfortable or discomfort, ask the person, let them know, like, what are some things that can allow you to feel that I've heard you. I mean, I think we all deserve to be heard in some capacity. We all deserve to feel, support, certainly no matter what, friendships, professional, school development, anything alike. But really, communication is key. Hey, maybe you didn't feel like I heard you in that way. Let's talk about it. How can I listen better, or vice versa?
Heard. From the martial arts perspective, right? We breathe wrong. We walk wrong. We don't know how to fall. Listening is another skill that we all think we have. But so just to affirm what you're saying, Ali, there are things we can learn. The ability to do a polite interjection for an affirmation, right? All four of us are nodding along with you. Sometimes I can't look at someone. I need to turn my ear to them. But I'll say, like, I'm listening, I promise. And I'll listen to them. Or sometimes I just don't get it. And I'll be like, you know what? Through no fault of your own. Can you say that to me again a little differently? Can you verbalize? Like, I'm let them know I'm trying to hold this in my hand and I just need a different angle on this. There are definitely little skills we can pick up along the way that don't take much. Sometimes it's cultural, but it's always personal. Um, Forgive me, I envy Allie. I don't have the ability to recall quite like she does. Can you remind me? The question you had asked me was about how I manage my own emotions with the topic or thoughts with the topic. I want to
Just
make
the
sure I answer
emotion.
the
No.
emotion. Yeah, I want to answer your question, not the version of your question I make up in my head because I'm creative, and so I'll, you know, forgive me. The emotional, yes.
Yep.
People will give you their true selves if you allow them the chance to do so and you make them feel safe. And sometimes people will tell you things that are very either triggering or will hold a mirror to yourself that might make you uncomfortable, right? That may make you look at yourself differently. And you need that deep reflection. You need to do that work, but maybe not right there live in the moment when they're still telling you something. So one thing I like to do is stay very grounded as someone's telling, especially if I'm in a longer conversation like this, like this podcast. I'm not just chatting with you on the street. If we're in the coffee shop or, wherever conversations may be had, we're on a road trip. If you're telling me something, I want to tell myself often and well, who am I? What do I represent? And am I really making this about us and not just thinking to respond? Because the second we put our guard down, we can reflexively think to respond and we're not actually listening, but we think we're good listeners, right? So I try not to get lazy. This is going to get a little lame, but I love citing the arts. And there's Rafiki from The Lion King, which means friend. And Rafiki says, look beyond what you see, right? So are you telling me what you're telling me? Or am I really thinking deeply beyond what you're telling me and hearing what you're saying? Right? If someone says, oh, well, I don't want to do this. Am I hearing that you don't want to do this? Is it an agency question? Or are you telling me how tired you are? You're telling me how overwhelmed you are. Is it really important that I pick where we go for dinner? Do you just need that help? Right? Like, am I really hearing you? So I think the trick to listening is to constantly make yourself a friend. And it can be very easy to center yourself instead of centering the conversation or the bond. So I try to do that. I don't always succeed. And I learned later on that I've maybe contextualized something wrong, but that's how I manage my emotions. If I hear something that I don't understand or makes me feel something, I try and remember, who am I? What do I represent? Am I being a friend in this moment? Is this even about this? Can I do this reflection at another time? What's most emotionally honest to this exact second? If Liam says, I don't want to listen to Metallica, Joe, while we're on this road trip, is he just being a jerk? Or did he have a bad memory with Metallica? Or is it just overstimulating right now? Or is he just hungry? Like, am I listening to him? Or am I just like, oh, well, Metallica, this great album is because of blah, blah, blah. I don't need to convince him. I need to listen to him. So that's how I manage the emotion, because it changes who you are and what you represent if you don't manage that emotion.
Very well said. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I think there's also, to me, in terms of communicating with others, there's there's a question of accepting, I guess, the randomness of life, or the random, like, that you have zero control over other people. I mean, we can look at the metadata on psychological interaction with different media and everything, and if you have a lot of money, you do have a certain level of control over other people. um, but as individuals, we don't. And I feel like, as we were talking about listening and everything, I feel like when we listen to others, and when others listen to us, we have an idea, a trend line in our head of, this is how the conversation might evolve, this is how things might end up, this is how things might go. And what I've seen when I talk to people all the time is you'll have an entire conversation, but you can kind of pinpoint where the conversation didn't align with where they thought it might go because that's the thing that they want to talk about. That's the thing that they want to focus on. And like we all do it to some extent. There's some people who do it very obviously, and there's some people who do it more subtly. Um, but as a to kind of reframe my thoughts in the form of a question, and this is not just to you, Joe, but to everybody. How do we as people, um, how do we reconcile the our own expectations with the expectations of others, and that things sort of evolve and they
Mm,
move, but what we're focusing on our perception of reality isn't the perception of reality. Like there's certain things that we can agree on, but it's not what the person we're talking to is seeing it in the same sense, or hearing in the same sense. There's something else is much more important, if that makes any sense.
that makes a ton of sense. At least I think it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense to me, we're about to find out, and we're going to answer your question in real time, right? By evolving together. Um, I have two kind of responses to it. The first is sometimes it's a glorious thing that a conversation can take an arc we don't expect. Sometimes it's beautiful. Um, However, just to answer another section, because I think it's very valid, is what happens when this conversation deviates from its original meaning or we misunderstand each other. I think it's important to write shit down, right? Like if I want to talk with you about something serious, right? Let's create a hypothetical. Dragon Ball Z. I'm a martial artist. I want to talk about martial arts. You want to talk about the dangers of Nietzschean thought. We're having two completely different conversations in lockstep, and we might not even realize it. Both are beautiful to have. Writing things down, like if I'm gonna have a interrelationship talk, like you know with a specific person, whether that's a romantic partner or my mother or whoever, I'm gonna keep that bond in mind because it's gonna change how I frame this thought. I'm gonna write down this thought, and I'm gonna say, okay, my ADD be damned, our human connection, whatever it's going to be, will find a way to validate this topic because it needs to be talked about. And sometimes I'll check in after. I'll be like, hey, did we talk about the thing? Right. And I think having a front end or back end answer to that, we're the only ones who can police those conversations, especially when the best conversations that feel so good are the ones that goes off the rails. But then you find out maybe minutes or hours later or immediately that maybe someone's harboring a resentment or a feeling of being unheard or feeling like the question was dodged. And it's better to just address that. So I like writing things down beforehand, thinking very intentionally about who I'm talking with. And I like circling back after. And I still sometimes will not hit the mark. I don't know if I'm hitting the mark right now. I don't know if I'm actually answering your question, but I'm letting you know right now I'm committed to answering your question, and we will circle back as needed to get the conversation that we need to have. I think that reaffirmation, that active listening, permission to fail and permission to try again, I think that's really valuable.
It's
I think,
a it's a good point.
noting down is it's a good idea. I'm definitely going to be incorporating that future on. But I like what you mentioned in terms of coming back, coming back to a conversation when you do have it doesn't matter in terms of positive or negative conversation that you had, but coming back is very important. It's just in the moment when tensions are high, emotions are high, like as a person, if you're not grounded, um,
Mhm.
you let your anger take place, and then the words that you speak are not yourself in a way.
Yeah.
So if you do think about what the conversation is after, I think you'll have a better meaning and express those emotions much better than in the moment. So yeah.
about uh, Liam or Allie?
Yeah, and just kind of with listening into the conversation in terms of like our reactions to things, right? And going back a couple of topics as far as, meeting people where they're at, I think as Joe has referenced a few different times in this podcast, we all come from different walks of life, all different backgrounds. So, you know, what I think about in the mental health perspective is self regulation, right? Like maybe I did get into a major disagreement with my significant other before a work related event or school event, and I'm just kind of giving these as scenarios because I think we all can attest that, we've been through something to where, it's affected our personal lives, but going into the situations and scenarios that we're dedicated to or passionate about, we want to represent our best selves, so I definitely think like feeling our emotions, but and allowing ourselves to feel it at different times. There's a right place and not wrong place, but there's certain places where you want to hold within, carry yourself well. Like don't make impulsive decisions based on things that have happened. But that was kind of what I had taken, from that. And I apologize. I did step away for one moment as I was helping my dog, who seems to always become more vocal whenever I'm doing some sort of meeting or podcast. And maybe he's trying to talk and be a part of it. I don't know. I can't speak dog, unfortunately. But so that's what I had taken from it. But I'll pass the baton to Liam.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing too, just going back a little bit, was it's interesting to see how you decompartmentalize, if that's the correct term. Allie will correct me if it's wrong. Don't worry. If how you decompartmentalize basically your thought process and your kind of endeavors in terms of like when you first went into acting, it seemed that you had a lot of kind of the, for a lack of a better term, the hero wanting to help the world. And then you were able to say, well, hold on, I can do this through politics, you know, studying to be a lawyer, and that can be where I do that. And then it decompartmentalized to the acting bit where it's like, all right, putting on my cap, the actor, right? Part of me, he can be in like some movies or some plays and stuff like that and be the fall guy or be the guy that needs to just be there to help the cast and crew do what they need to do. And then put on the politician slash lawyer hat. Now this is where I can actually help change the world for the better. And I think that's a really admirable ability to be able to step away from ego and say, you know what, there's some guy that's going to come in here, especially like New York and stuff. That's a hot shot. That's going to be like, hey, I'm the superhero, all this kind of stuff, and for you to be like, all right, yeah, let him do what he's doing, and let me be the guy he punches in the face. And then on the flip side, being able to know that my purpose is more into the actual political side of things. I just think that's admirable.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I want to serve, right? And if I'm an actor, I don't want to walk on stage and be like, "You're lucky to have me here." I want to look at it as we are a team that's getting this story told. And if I'm helping as crew or helping as the star or helping as a background actor, happen, John Wick can shoot me 9 times. I'll die a 10th. Whatever's going to help the story get told, right? And I treat everything with that. I recently, just to give you a little bit of a tidbit, just yesterday I reached out to a local activist group for the new No King stuff, and I told them, I was like, listen, spent my whole life being a volunteer. I do not like. I won't be a politician. I'll be a public servant. I don't like politicians who show up for an hour, do the photo op, slow everybody down from eating, and leave. So I told them I would love to be able to speak at this event, but please make sure my hands are busy all 10 hours of the day. Like I'm here to actually be useful, right? Like I don't want to drive here 20 minutes before, speak for 5, take a photo and leave. And I think that the compartmentalization is a symptom rather than a trait. It comes from actually wanting to serve. And when you change your North Star, your behavior almost sometimes follows, even if it doesn't follow well, you learn the discipline as you go. So my North Star is always like, how can I be a friend? How can I be of service? How can I meet you where you are? Do you just need to vent and be angry for 10 minutes and you're good, then I'm not giving you advice. I'm just being your ear. Do you actually want advice? Then maybe I need to actually really listen and really think about your life, because your life isn't my life, and offer you another person's perspective on your life so that you're empowered to make that choice. And that's, I think, where the compartmentalization comes from, not just as an actor, not just as someone trying to serve my communities through this politics stuff, but just as a person, someone who just wants to show up for his friends and just wants to exist in the world differently. You know, Christopher Reeve once did an interview where people asked him what Superman is, and he's like, a friend. And I saw that interview at like 9 years old, and I was like, yes, that's what I feel when I read these comics or I watch these things. It's the knowledge that this person is looking out for me, whether or not they can fly, whether or not they'll actually help me. They're going to try to. And that's a sincerity you can't fake, no matter. And I'm going to take a shot if you got to edit it out. No matter how much the Democrats want to replicate authenticity, you have to actually be authentic. You have to actually be sincere. You can't fake this. You can't engineer this. That's where the compartmentalization comes from. It's just a genuine spear in a specific direction. Everything else follows.
So, and Joe, I understand you do wear a lot of different caps, right? And you travel across a couple of different states, as you've referenced, to be able to follow through with your passions, and not only with your passions, but also to essentially, finance your way through these things, right? So I know that, you work in dentistry, you're going to school, you're doing a lot of things, but in the very limited time that you do have, it sounds like there's not a lot of time just for Joe. What are some things that you would say that you enjoy that isn't necessarily a job? And the reason I ask this is, and a lot of us know, or maybe you guys don't, and again, check out some of our other podcasts to be able to learn a little bit more about each of us as hosts and contributors to the conversations we're having. I was in physical health and wellness for over 10 years, and I loved it, and I also love the mental health industry. However, back when I was a kid, me and Liam's father was a bodybuilder, and that's how I got into the industry. And, at first it was, working, with individuals, helping them with their goals. I also started to work on my own self. I was bullied growing up quite a bit. So I wanted to work on my own confidence and self-esteem. But then, as you're traveling a lot, you're doing a lot of things, and you're wearing many caps in something that was once a hobby. It doesn't feel as a hobby anymore. Like, it actually took me quite a long time, even after moving into the mental health field, to find fitness to be a hobby again. Because going to a Zumba class, when I taught Zumba for many, many years, I was still in the instructor role. I was counting the steps and things. I'm like, no, you're here as a participant. You're not here to coordinate the class, or in a spin class, for example. Oh, there's so many seconds we're up and down. No, just Allie, sit back and enjoy something. Let yourself enjoy it. So again, going back to the question, those things that you feel like, hey, this is a great way to decompress. Doesn't feel like I'm making any strenuous strides towards further burnout or exhaustion.
Yeah, I suppose you have to really listen to yourself and listen to what recharges you. I'm a lifelong athlete, lifelong martial artist, and sometimes, right, as an actor, you can be taken out of a film, right? I could be sitting in the movie theater enjoying it and go, ooh, you started thinking about the job, and now you're not just enjoying the art. Sometimes I love watching old samurai movies and old films, and sometimes you see a thing and you go, I see sometimes modern choreography, and I won't say which companies, but some of them are major ones with star spangled beings, and the choreography is awesome. Or you could drive a truck through the hole; it's like terrible. So there are sometimes ways in which the things I use to mitigate the burnout, I can be sort of jettisoned from, right? Like, all right, I'm going to stop. I'm going to watch a movie. And 10 minutes in, I'm like, and I get on my phone. right? And that's the worst thing. The phone is the worst thing. The way I recovered from burnout is mostly learning. I enjoy the flow state. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi was one of the other positive psychologists I truly enjoy. And he used to say that joy doesn't necessarily come from happiness, it comes from time and flow state. Finding those activities that encourage flow and a feeling of connection. And yeah, there's a joy in it, but it's slightly different than just like perky happiness. I try and do everything I can to find my flow states, and sometimes they change. Sometimes I'm reading case law and I'm just in flow state because I do love what I'm learning. Sometimes I'm doing the campaign and I'm in flow state because I truly love what I'm doing. Sometimes I just got to pick up my phone and pick up a Pokemon game and start playing a Pokemon game because all my other flow states are failing. So I try and find my flow states. Sometimes that means I do a kata. Sometimes that means I can't touch the stuff that I love because I forget which other psychologist talked about this, but they took a bunch of kids who loved a thing and said, we'll pay you to do it. The kids lost interest. Now that there was a monetary incentive. There is when a hobby becomes a job, there is a feeling of burden, no matter how much you want it or love it or worked for it. And that can be very challenging to evolve with. So I keep a Rolodex of things. And sometimes it's nostalgic stuff, or sometimes you just can't watch the same movie twice, right? Sometimes you have to watch the Lord of the Rings extended editions on repeat to fall asleep for 5 months straight because that's what does it for you. You know, you follow yourself and you listen to yourself and you find what works. And you try not to be angry at yourself if things don't work. If I pick up my sword and it's just not working and I'm being too critical and I'm getting in my head and being neurotic and I'm not in a flow state, you got to put it down. You can't force it.
I mean, I think that to to chime in on his answer, just because I think it's something that we could all, reflect on and try and figure out. Because I think to varying degrees, we all experience burnout, and I would say that in my experience, just because you're burning out more doesn't mean that somebody else who's also burning out isn't going through the same things mentally. Um, but I would also say that for me, I'm very fortunate to have, a number of people in my life that look out for me, and fortunately or unfortunately, they know they have to. And I reciprocate, but like, we're flawed beings and I am a very flawed person. Um, but having those people uh there to measure with you or to uh, relate with you is very important. And I think that that's going back to something that we talked about earlier. That's one of the things that I think makes mental health so important now is all of us had those people on some level. And now uh, with how divisive everything has gotten, with how intense everybody feels about every freaking thing, like I got into a I got into a really intense argument with somebody the other day because they were hating on the new Star Wars trilogy, and I was like, I loved one and two. We can agree on three that it was terrible, but I loved one and two, and they were just like intense about no, it's all terrible. You have to believe that it's all terrible. Um, but I think that we lose that. We a lot of us, a lot of people have lost that because there's so many of us that need to um that want to feel agreed with on everything or whatever. Um so for me to add on to that, I was really long way to add on to it. But for me to add on to that, it's building a community, building a group of people that can that can help you when you can't recognize that you need to help yourself, if that makes any sense.
That makes total sense. We all deserve safe, constructive criticism. And you know what? Maybe I like a movie and you don't. And we both love Star Wars, and that can be okay. And we can talk about those uncomfortable conversations. Like, here's why I liked it. And you can say, ugh. But we got to avoid the tribalism because then we can't have community, right? Like, The Last Jedi is objectively a great film, it is a well made film. Maybe it's not the best Star Wars movie, or maybe you don't like it, or maybe you do. And we can talk about that. We can argue filmmaking techniques versus the spirit of the story, and whether it was made with us in mind. We can start getting into the meat of it, but you, we got to be careful of that. Like, all or nothing. Well, you don't like, and people just shut down. We need that self critique. We need that. We need people who can
Yeah.
call us out.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I'm in a room with people who have referenced Star Wars, so I'm a little nervous to say this, but I've maybe watched 5 minutes of one of the movies, and I mean, I'm open to seeing them. It's just between all the schooling I went through and with my career mental health, I actually haven't been able to sit down and watch one. But it's definitely on my list of things to do. I live in Florida, so when I lived up in Connecticut, for many years, I guess I had a better excuse living there to be able to sit down with being snowed in and stuff, as many of us are currently. But now I spend more time outdoors, but I'm going to get there. But something, a part of the conversation, and again, Joe, I'm just blown away by all the experiences that you've done so far, and all the things that you're doing to contribute to the community. But a question that kind of comes up, well, two questions, I guess, is, you're working in one industry, right? And I remember when I was in grad school, I was working in crisis services for mental health to break into the field. I was working as a personal trainer, group exercise instructor at the time, and studying. So do you feel like working in one field that's different than the one you're pursuing, there's ever a cross between the two? Because I remember when I was in grad school studying and working in the field, my clients for personal training would actually ask me questions and say, so can you diagnose me since you're in mental health? And I'm like, well, no, that's not a part of my role here. And I'm still studying, things like that. But in your opinion, I mean, do you ever feel like the two mesh together? Do they ever cross between each other? Like what is that like?
They mesh together almost 100%. So I work as a dental assistant. So I can take x-rays. I can seat the patient. I can do iTero scans. I do, I make temps. I make night guards. I do lab work. But the primary job, outside of writing notes and doing all the things I can do on a clinical side, is social emotional. I do the nursing side of it. Whatever you're afraid of, finances, dentistry is just a vulnerable place. Maybe you went through SA in life, and so this is just a position you don't want to be in. My job is to instantly try and clock where you are and literally meet where you are. A lot of what I believe I pick up on the job. I get X amount of patients in a day, and I get 5-10 minutes with you to try and feel where you are. And where I am in Greenwich, a lot of these people are either running empires or running after the next paycheck because they really are in a house of cards and they're struggling to stay afloat. So every day in dentistry has allowed me to meet human beings in a position where they're the most vulnerable and meet them where they are. And that's informed how I walk through the world. That's informed how I approach the campaign. You can learn the skills at one job, at one career, at one way of life that you really love, and know that at a certain point, maybe that job got you to where you need to go, but does distract in some ways. Like, it's a violent change of focus to go from serving everybody in a clinical environment to then being on a train and going, okay, how do I focus on law now? Or opening up Instagram and being like, who did what? I need to make a post about this. And now that adds to my schedule and now your whole world is destroyed. And you kind of just wish you had one more patient because it's a little more simple to focus on someone else's needs. So from a skill set, they mesh almost 100%. On a campaign trail. I'm being your dental assistant. I'm learning where you are. I'm being that friend. I'm practicing everything I've mentioned leading up to this point. But structurally, I'm not campaigning if I'm taking a paycheck from you, right? Like I'm at your job. You hired me. I'm wearing your scrubs. Like I'm keeping it 100. Like I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Everything else happens off the clock. And that means I'm not studying at work. And there's students who just get to study all day, and that means after work I got to put in the effort to make up for that. So there are ways it 100% meshes, and there are ways where, yeah, logistically there's a huge difference here. I got to wake up, lock in, clock in, and then after work start doing a bunch of stuff. So now I used to work full time as a dental assistant and go to school and teach karate, but it didn't give me enough time. So my job is very understanding. They give me Mondays off. I use that to work on school, sometimes do things with the campaign, mostly school. Um, and now I take earlier classes, so I clock out earlier 3 other days a week. So now I'm kind of part time in 2 different jobs, which is hard on the finances, which is hard on the mental health. But I still show up at each thing as best I can.
That's good. That's good. And, I think it's also important how you communicate that, right? Because you were doing a lot of things, but you communicated with your employers, essentially that, hey, you know, I'm on this mission, this is what I'm doing, and everybody's, you know, in agreement that, this works best for you, and you're still showing up and doing what you need to do for, the rules that you have. So I commend you on all those efforts, because I think that's another thing that maybe a lot of you all that are watching this might feel anxious, like, hey, my school schedule this semester is going to be a little bit more chaotic. Like, what do I do? I can't quit my job because I'm financially binded, but also, you know, depending on, on what the field is, like finding that alternative, right? Like,
Mm.
I have a really good friend who just had her first child, and she worked in nursing full time Monday through Friday. But as her husband and her, try to coordinate care for their child, she actually went to working overnights because it was just easier, so she could be home all week with their child. And I again, starting that conversation can be very scary with an employer or a school, but as long as everybody is in the know, yeah, that's really important. So that's awesome that you've been able to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes patients come in and I make the joke, right? You have your therapist, your barber, your bartender, your dental assistant. People will tell me things I have no right to know, from adultery to like they confess everything to me like I'm their priest. And sometimes they want to talk politics with me, and I try and be a mirror and be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Not a single patient knows what I'm doing. Some know I'm in law school. But I don't let that's not my job to recruit you. My job is to take care of you, your oral health. And I also have a duty to this employer, keeping our honor intact by taking these complications and really being disciplined about, what's correct. Like if I have a patient right now that's like, man, maybe you should run for something. That's not my opening. No. You can see me on TV or something, or you can see me at a town hall. Right now I'm here for you and your teeth. I'm here for
Yeah.
my boss. And it can be scary to talk about these conversations. But life is a lot of relationship management. And the more we're afraid to have those conversations, the less we're going to be able to create. Right. And my bosses could have easily been like, you, dude, we love you. But no. And I would have to understand. And then we can have that talk. But they also deserve to have me at my best. If I'm coming in every day tired or late or distracted, that's something they need to be able to tell me and I need to be able to fix. Like I'm too proud. I grew up working hard. If you're telling me I suck, like I'm going to try and change that. What do you mean I'm your worst guy? No, I'm your best guy. I'm going to rally. So you have to find those boundaries and manage those relationships.
Sure. And going back to what you were mentioning about like your patients, or, like in mental health, we always call them clients.
Yeah.
But, with respect to patients and clients, and this goes between all of the fields alike. I mean, sometimes people do want to ask us our beliefs, ask us about our lives, and we're not trying to be dismissive, but we do
No.
redirect in our fields, because we are the professionals that are in business to essentially put ourselves out of business, we say, in the mental health field. Like, we're here to serve you, we're here to be that voice and that person to help to unravel those things that have been more challenging or difficult for you. So again, essentially, we are meeting people where they are, but redirecting, like, something when I was working in the field in person with crisis work. I was working with a lot of children and adolescents, and I can recall many instances where a child would say, well, tell me about where you live, tell me about your family and things. And these weren't obviously, pieces of information that we would be able to disclose. However, well, it sounds like it's important for you to know a little bit more about me. What can I do to help to better, you know,
Yeah.
have a relationship with you, but keep it in that professional setting, of course.
Yeah.
But it does sound like, in your works of all, shapes and sizes, you're very, approachable. People feel comfortable with you. I remember being essentially a therapist when I was a personal trainer. And maybe at times when I go to my hairstylist, I see them as my therapist because that's the person that I can talk to and allow to listen. So I definitely can relate and connect with you on those different topics there.
Yeah. Community is a form of therapy. And yes, there's actually being a professional and needing a professional. But then there's also these ways where just human to human, we can offer each other reassurances and comfort. And, that's one way to do business, to put yourself out of business. Like, do you have a good community, right? Like, if you're in my chair, I'm going to be like, how's your oral hygiene? Do you do proper home care, right? Like, that's essential in every industry. Having a good community and a therapist, you're golden. Like, you can be okay. We can figure everything out in time by doing the work, by being honest. But having the best therapist in the world and no community or no valid support structures, no hairstylists. I mean, that's not a problem for me. But you need those connections to sustain human life. It's like oxygen.
Totally agree. The one question I do have is, so for example, for me, I travel a lot between like Florida and South Carolina, and
Mm,
they're very similar looking states. Different, I say similar, but they're still different. Like
yeah.
the people are different, stuff like that. I mean, South Carolina is a more southern Florida, but anyway, you know, I go between the two states and I'll be in South Carolina. I'm like, all right, I want to go do this. I'm like, oh, that's not here. That's in Florida. And I'll be in Florida and I'll be like, I want to go do this. That's in South Carolina. That
Yeah.
specific kind of place. And I take a plane. So for me, like, it just feels like I'm going down the street and then I'm there, but my brain just blocks out the rest of it, of the flying and all that kind of stuff and the logistics in my mind. My brain, humans are very like wired just to like think very simply, even as smart as we are. So my question to you is like somewhere like Connecticut where it can be like a ghost town compared to like New York. How do you deal with that mental kind of like thing where you're like, oh, I'm in Connecticut right now, but your brain still feels like it's in New York, and it's like I'm gonna go and get like my favorite pizza from. Oh wait, I'm in New Haven. I'm gonna get New Haven pizza, not New York pizza. It's gonna be a few people in there, not like 1,000 people that are like
Yeah.
busy going to their office jobs. How do you like deal with that like kind of feeling?
I got to say, answering this probably is make or break for my campaign. I don't know, actually. And even before I went back and forth between New York, just being back and forth within Connecticut, which is a very small state and very diverse and very different. I also was in the Naugatuck Valley, which can be different from Bridgeport, which can be different from Stanford. There are times I'm driving, it's 10:30 at night, I'm coming home from my friend's house, I pull into a gas station, they turn the lights off. I'm like, what do you mean you're not 24 hours? I need gas. I got another 30 miles to go. There are times I just crashed out. I was like, what am I going to do? I'm down to E. Like, what do I do? So, it can be challenging holding in your brain the way that, there are these microcultural spatial awarenesses of like, yeah, this is different, right? Like, in Connecticut, I'm going to talk about alcohol for a minute. In Connecticut, for many years, there were the Sunday blue laws, which were left over from like the Quaker and Puritan, the Christian kind of subsections. Um, Forgive me, my ear is bothering me a little. Um, so for Sundays, you just couldn't get alcohol, which didn't really bother me. It was just something to know. But then you drive 20 minutes and you're in New York and bars are open till 4 a.m., but they close at 2 here. It's relevant because there are certain roads I wouldn't want to be caught on at that time of night, either because I don't want to get into an accident from someone who's driving irresponsibly, or I don't want someone to assume that I'm the irresponsible driver and pull me over. So there are little things that you just get used to like that because we are wired to think simply. So I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not going over there at that time. And I don't even think about why. I'm just used to it now. Pizza, I'm just spoiled. Like I live in the greatest spot and I've had the worst pizza in my life here too, right? It's not just like the region, it's the person, it's the love, it's the craft. So sometimes it comes down to wait, who's the cook on the third shift versus the second? Sometimes you get to know the real details. And it's like, oh yeah, let's go on Thursday night because that's our favorite chef, right? Like sometimes you get lucky and you really know people. And you could be like, yeah, that's Ronnie tonight or that's Enrique tonight. Like they're making the good food. But sometimes for me, it's like surfing. Like I feel the rhythm of where I am, right? And especially since I commute daily, right? Feeling the rhythm of like, oh, I need to do a ton of things. I'll do them all on Saturday. No, I won't. Not with the traffic in Connecticut. No, I won't. I might do them on the Monday that I have off because people are at work, right? Feeling the rhythm of where you are. I don't feel like I have to hold much in my head. They are similar and yet they are culturally distinct in a lot of ways. Um, but when you're from and of somewhere, it doesn't feel like a thing you have to think about. It becomes instinctive. Just like you just take your plane ride. It's what you're doing. But yeah, sometimes you get the calling to do a thing and you have to just remember where you are. And I get that effect as well. But sometimes there are these like micro instincts that I've developed where I just know not to order pizza from a certain spot at a certain time or not to drive down a certain road. Or if I want to get groceries or hardware parts, I know where to go when. I still don't know how to get somewhere on time now post pandemic. There are a lot more drivers in Connecticut, so from a private transportation mode, I'm still struggling to get used to things. But you just do it. You just surf it. You find your rhythm, you find your feel.
Just to follow that question up, another one I had too. It's a little bit different, but I feel like this is a very important question to ask. I'm going to try to keep this as nonpartisan as possible because I feel like it
Yep.
could just be anybody really kind of have this experience, especially with you as well. Have you ever had kind of like, you have your ideologies and whatnot, and you remember a family member at that Thanksgiving dinner, and you remember the values that they instilled in you, despite the fact that they're on the opposite spectrum on the other side of the debate, and you see something in your policy, like you see a policy that you were really hoping
Mhm.
for, it comes up and boom, it happens, and you're like, great, this policy, it basically this policy went through, and law is going to be the way that I want it to be. And you think of that one person who is on the other political aisle, and you think, well, that policy has a lot of what they instilled in me as somebody, like say an uncle, a father, right, a grandfather, who told me that this should be the way the world is. And that
Mm.
policy embodies almost all of what they said, or a little bit of what they said of how the world should be.
Yeah.
And when you see them and you're like, hey, this policy, they immediately start like knocking the policy down.
Yep.
And it's because of their guy saying like it's no good.
Yeah.
How do you kind of mentally deal with that when you feel that maybe, there's more to the story, or maybe that you feel like they're being led astray?
Sure. First off, fantastic question. And the short answer is that's the duty of being in a democracy, right? Like that is the job. Unless you want a pure monarchy or a pure fascist, like we're supposed to have these conversations. So, if I say, and I can keep it mostly nonpartisan with this as well, but if I say, hey, I was raised by this person under these values, and I'll give an example. I have a person who I love with all my heart, and he taught me a lot about punk rock and roll, and he gave me my comics. And in high school, every day, we watched Fox News together, every day. But every night, I watched Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. So I was getting multiple things, and he was getting one thing. But I was also getting punk rock and all the messages of hardcore and all the messages of inclusivity. And so if I apply what he taught me, which is work hard, protect everyone, strength and honor, right? I apply a lot of that from that bend. I hold it as sacred. It still means a lot to me, even if I'm not of the same voter pool. But if I see that people are, sometimes I'll see policies where I'm like, yo, he would love this. And then you do see that there are pundits, and people are, sadly, people can be convinced to go against their own best interest. I've been convinced. It happens to us all, right? That does happen. And that comes back to saying, like, is this a person who wants to have the dialogue at all? Or does he just want to do the team sports thing and be mad at me for being different, even though I actually am embodying the beliefs he instilled? It hurts. It breaks your heart. There's very little dividing us. But ideologies change almost daily. Any party will change as times change. We're not living in 2008 or 2012 or 2020. So things kind of micro evolve as we go, and people evolve with them. The heartbreaking thing is that sometimes people just don't want to talk about it. And the best thing you can do is put yourself in a position to have open arms. If he sees this and is like, yo, you, please talk with me. I love you. That's it. And if we really disagree, there's a lot we agree on. There's a lot, core foundations of who I am. So let's get back to that. And then use that as the platform to now redigest what we just talked about, rather than where we got the information. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're fooling me. Maybe they're telling me all these great things are going to happen with this law. And in theory, they will. And in practice, they won't. Maybe I have something to learn from you rather than you have something to learn from me. I don't know. And we won't know until we talk about it. So, I mean, I'm as anti-establishment as they come, and I'm running for the establishment. There's a lot to unpack there. And it's because I believe we can reconstruct our lives legally, with the system, with each other. And I don't believe we can do any of that in a silo. It's all connected. I really believe that. So it's a work in progress, Liam. I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'm trying to keep myself open armed to people who want to talk with me. But sometimes if they come for your throat, you do have to take a step back and hope that you get another opportunity with less vehement nature. This individual in question, positive relationship, seen him multiple times, worship the ground he walks on, love him with all my heart. We just haven't talked about it. I've had other individuals we have talked about, and it hasn't gone well, and it hurts. I have other individuals we've talked about and we've disagreed, but it's been beautiful. You gotta evolve with it. I don't know. I don't have the answers yet. And I think it's more powerful to say you don't know and you're going to try than be like, it's definitely going to work if I do this. That's dangerous. I hope that answered. I know I got kind of in the weeds with my own emotions, and I want to make sure I actually listened to you and answered your question. But the short answer is I have no freaking clue. They just try to do best.
Yeah, that was a good answer. It also gave me some perspective that I wasn't really seeing, that kind of like put more perspective into the question too than I thought it was. So that was a good answer.
Thank you. Yeah, that question's a question all of us are going to face every day. I mean, it's a profound thing. Even even if we think we're completely aligned 90% on an issue, we might actually, if you and I are agreeing on, like, we want this garden to be made and we're both fully about it, I might be thinking petunias and you might be thinking vegetables. Or I might be thinking about the pollinators and you might be thinking about kids playing on the swings. Like, we agree, but we haven't talked about some of the substantive stuff. Or maybe we need a collection, and that's the duty of democracy, is to talk about it. Garden doesn't just mean garden. To some people, that means playground. To some people, that means mini golf. To some people, that means quasi-farm. To some people, that means no, a garden means a garden. I want to smell my way through the walking path. It's different. And if we don't talk about it, we're just going to walk away with what we thought we said. And, from a belief perspective, we could really be on the same belief, but we're not on the same thought.
I will say, to kind of add to what you were talking about, that is something that always gets me about political pundits and just politics in general, is the certainty with which people express an uncertain idea
Mhm.
um, always kind of it like as a person it turns me off because I'm just like, but you can't know, like
Yeah.
we can't for so many things. Um, how do you as a political candidate reconcile that that is part of the world of politics is that that certainty sells while the uncertainty tends not to. How do you express the, hey, it's possible for me to be wrong, but you should follow me anyway because X, Y, and Z, if that makes any sense.
It's a great question, and it makes total sense. I think there's a great power in saying, I don't know. I think there's a great power in saying, hey, I'm not an electrician, but you, my constituent, are. And I'm going to listen to you at this town hall, and you're going to tell me what for. You're going to tell me what you think I'm doing wrong. I think there's a value in learning, and false confidence can still have an effect, right? It can intimidate the opponent. You can gaslight yourself, right, into thinking. But now we're all living in a delusion that kind of cracks pretty quickly. I would rather live in the honest truth of I confidently don't know. I confidently do know. Or I am confidently actively doing research and I can tell you my private opinion, but I'm not someone who's done the requisite hours of learning required, in my opinion, to release a statement for the public, right? Like you have a duty when you're in front of a ton of people. And I don't want to just spew nonsense, right? I do think there's a great power in saying I don't know. And I get it. I get that there are current rules. I get that there are ways that things currently function. But if it was working, it would have worked. So I'm trying to do things differently and I'm learning on the go. Um, and, I do think real leadership means empowering other people to be leaders, not in speaking for them, but, speaking out together. Um, and when we use the term tip of the spear, the tip's the first thing that penetrates, but there's a shaft and an arm and a leg, and there's physics and anatomy, and there's a function to how this thing moves in space and time. And I think the only thing a political representative can ever be is the tip of that spear. The community behind them, none of that's not sharp if it's not moving. Schrodinger's sharpness, it doesn't matter if it's sitting on a table. It matters when a human touches it or uses it. So to answer your question a lot more simply, I would rather just be honest about my shortcomings and use that as a chance to grow with my community behind me, helping me grow as I help them, than project this lie. I'm an actor, but I only know how to lie on stage. It's because it's the truth. You're telling the truth. You're telling the script. You're telling the emotion. I have no interest in spending my energy manipulating people. I have other things that make me happy. I don't value power for power's sake or false confidence, right? The guy who shows up to the sparring match going, I'm going to beat everybody up, is just, he's got a bad attitude. And he's probably going to lose pretty quickly. I'm a martial artist. If you hit me, thank you. You've shown me where my weakness is. So I approach everything like it's sparring. Yeah, please, let's have this conversation. Oh, yep. I'm going to put that up. I'm going to put those hands up. Politicians all too often project whether it's their greatest weakness or their greatest strength, but that's all it is. It's projection. Mythology informs us that it doesn't save us. The stories we tell ourselves guide us, but it doesn't walk through the world for us. I can bring anything anyone says to me ever back to Star Wars. That is a skill that I have. I once on a headset crewed an entire musical, only responding to my stage manager with the fly instructions with Star Wars quotes. It's still my life. Star Wars isn't going to live it for me. So I think a lot of these politicians get lost in this thing where they need to create this mythological confidence of always being right. And that's just not human. I don't want to anthropomorphize myself into this entity. I want to be myself. If you want me, I will serve. If you don't want me, I understand. I'm not everybody's type. I wouldn't date me. I don't like how I look, right? And maybe I'm not supposed to be your representative, but I would rather be honest with you. I think we need a level of radical honesty and radical accountability that would usher in self retirement of most politicians all across the board because it's not the way the current game is played. Because it shouldn't be a game. People are dying. People live. We live together and die together under bad policy. This is a job, and a lot of them don't do it. I'd rather say I don't know. I'd much rather say I'm not the expert on this, but I will learn with you. And we'll make the best informed decision we can together. Period. Got me this far. That's how I know most of what I know. I didn't know how to sword fight once. Then I got hit a few times. Now I know how to sword fight. Think I can figure out difficult topics. But not if I'm like, I got it. And you're not learning.
That's tough for all of us because we're one of the things growing up that I share with my younger sisters who are quite a bit younger than me, although that distance means less and less as they grow up, um, is is that at a certain point in my adulthood, I realized that I would never be an adult because nobody's an adult. And everybody's just a kid who's gotten better at pretending to be an adult. Um, but yeah, I think there's this we have this tendency, this childlike tendency to want to see things right and wrong, good and bad, the hero and the villain. And for the most part, as we're growing up, hopefully we can kind of recognize it's all kind of it's all a gray area. There are some parts of it that are actively close to being great and actively close to being bad, but most of it's nebulous, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but Liam, I know you wanted to ask something else.
Yeah, the one question I did have is so this is going to be both for Joe and Allie, but I want Joe to answer it first, just as a since he has a background in creativity as well as just kind of that aspect, and I want Allie to answer it as a clinician, uh, the best she can, just because I've had this kind of thing for a while now, and I just feel like it's perfect timing. um, for a lot of creative people, right? you know, it's like, hey, I make this thing, I do this thing, I make music, and it's a hobby, and I have a day job. I don't want to talk on that aspect of it, but I want to talk more of like, I feel like even if you're someone who you're like what creative people see as just the run of the mill guy. You go to work, that's what you do. You come home, you have the kids, the whole nine, but you still are creative in the fact that you tie your creativity to something like a Star Wars, or you tie your creativity to something like a TV show. Like you could talk all day about this TV show, and a creative person might look at that and be like, wow, I didn't know you actually had that creative part of your brain. I believe that everybody's creative. It's just that some people choose to do things with creativity in terms of acting, making music, stuff like that, and other people choose to kind of be a fan of creativity and kind of build their own world inside of creativity. So my question to you is, when thinking about the average Joe who isn't creative in the traditional aspect, but is creative in like, I'm a like someone who's a Disney adult or a fan of anime, and they live their life regularly. But then once it comes to like their hobby of the anime, Star Wars, or what have you, they're very, into it. How do you like kind of see that kind of person in terms of like as a political candidate? Because I know some people like, they really are big into One Piece in certain countries, and they're waving that flag. What how do you kind of feel about just how people tie in media with real life? Because a
Yeah.
movie is different than, how we live our life.
Well, I forget the artist who said this, but you reminded me of this just now. There was a famous, I think, painter or sculptor who said that every child is an artist, but some convince themselves they're not. And I truly believe from the most inner fiber of my being that one of the hardest things any of us can do in life is grow up. Being a child and just surviving to adulthood and doing everything that everyone's telling you to do and learning and is an incredibly difficult thing. And I think we see a lot of adults don't actually do it well, right? We get stuck somewhere. We have fixations, we have traumas. Like, it's very difficult to grow up. And I think as people grow up, they start having reasoning conversations with this artist inside. You don't need to be an opera singer or a traditional, musical theater person or painter and then not call yourself an artist. I know some guys who do trades that roll a cigarette perfectly or know how to build these beautiful pieces of woodwork. Or when you look at their electrical, the way the wires are actually organized in the box, you're like, what is this person? This person's mind is jacked in. We're all creative and we do have propensities. We do have places where that creativity leans. Some people can look ahead at a trail and they just see it. They see the trail, they see the pattern recognition. I see these trees, I see these tracks, I see these scent marks. Some people are really good with hand-eye. They're great archers or shooters. Some people are martial artists, bodybuilders. They're no less of a sculptor, right? Nutritionists are looking at the math and the equation and writing that symphony of how do I best fuel this engine. I don't think a human being can fail at being creative. I think that all of us struggle to grow in environments that are either malicious or not correct for us. And I think we cope the best ways we can. So the average Joe, the difference between them and Liza Minnelli, them and Bruce Lee, them and Einstein, is that we know the names I just said, right? Those are beings who, for one reason or another, because the system liked them or because they achieved it or what have you, were given permission to kind of grow. And they had flaws. I mean, I say had, like, Liza Minnelli's still alive. But the point is, the average person is beautiful and profound and limitless, and except for the limits we put on ourselves or except for the ways in which the environment might win. I've met dudes who can look at a 2-minute YouTube video and use half of the tools in it, and they've changed a car part in their backyard in the middle of Naugatuck, Connecticut. Just genius. Just can do it. Is he not genius because he's not monetizing it or because it's not hanging in the Louvre? So I do believe everyone's an artist. And I think it's our duty to find the ways where we can fully express and develop our being and to be brave and go to the environments that help affirm that.
Yeah, and to, add the mental health perspective as well. And Liam, I know you wanted to have a little bit of perspective from a clinician standpoint. So yes, we all are very creative in our own ways, right? And I think especially across different fields, we are able to, implement our creativity differently. So again, when I was breaking into the mental health field, and in short, during my graduate program, I was in a K-CREP university, and I think a lot of different curriculums may operate the same or a little bit differently, but a part of not just studying and working to financially support myself, I was also seeing clients, group couples individually in a hybrid setting to fulfill my undergrad internship hours. So, it didn't matter if I was tired. It didn't matter if I had a test in 3 or 4 hours. I had to still perform and be creative as a clinician, utilizing all of the different theoretical orientations and techniques to best serve the clients that were presented in front of me. I also link it to when a client comes to me or comes to one of my colleagues, right? Sometimes people don't always come to therapy because of a direct issue, a past experience, but sometimes they're just looking for guidance to have that creativity. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked in many different forms over the years and even when I was in personal training, if you were me, what would you do? you're my last hope. What do I do? That's hard, to place on anyone. And that goes along any profession. And I think what we do as professionals, again, speaking outside of the clinician, speaking outside of the personal trainer here, I'm speaking for all professions in itself, meeting the person where they are and trying to explore, I guess is the best terminology, what their creativity looks like, help them to explore where their creativity wants to go. Um, and I could go down so many different examples clinically of people that don't maybe see their full potential, but we do, and again, across all of these fields, like, for example, Joe referenced dentistry, if somebody comes in and they have difficulty with their oral hygiene, Joe is the person that's going to walk alongside you on that journey and tell you, hey, here's things you can do. It's up to that person to take that next step, right? Mental health, same thing. We see your best potential, but we would be the ones to you know, creatively and strategically develop a plan for how you can see that for yourself. We can't directly tell you how to do this or what to do. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, great answers. All together, just all good answers. Thank you, guys.
We had a conversation with one of psychologist, Dr. Wendy Connor, and then the first question she had asked us, and I wanted to ask you at the same time was, what makes you thrive, right? All these different things that you have going in your life, what makes you thrive to be best at every single thing that you do and enjoy in a way at the same time.
Well, I love East Asian thought and philosophy, and Zhuangzi once said, "Happiness is going along with things." And he didn't mean that as passivity, but he meant that as in being an observer, finding an enrichment and a joy in the observed. Sometimes you just take a breath and sit down and observe the joy that's happening around you. When you observe, and I can make this about specific people, right? It's not just sitting on a park bench and just hearing the laughter of children and seeing families being safe and just feeling fulfilled. When I see a friend nail that backflip and they're pursuing stunts, when I see that friend who's going to grad school and they get through the test and they get, seeing people you love or even don't even know but care about because they're people succeed and thrive can be not only internally very satisfying, but it can be a mirror. It'd be like, you know what? Right? For example, New York's very close to where I live. Zoran just won. Everyone said he wouldn't, and he did it by being kind. That inspires me to say, how do I be myself? When I do have stunt friends who are nailing flips and booking good jobs. I don't want to feel envy. So I don't. I have that moment of like, wow, like you're doing it. And then I do maybe 2 more push-ups that day out of joy. Out of joy. It has to be out of joy, not out of comparison. So a part of it is Taoist. A part of me is saying, you know what? I live in this world. I swim in this sea. I can feel its current. I can feel jubilee when my friends are diving out of the water and glistening into the sun. But I also got to swim. And it helps me inform how I'm going to do that. And I can say a bunch of different examples, but I know we're at a time limit.
Oh, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And then we wish you all the best in anything that you do.
Thank you. I wish that for you as well. We're all just walking each other home.
Yeah.
Right? We're all just growing up together.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Again, best of luck to your campaign and your studies. Thank you to Lamco Wellness for sponsoring this podcast and everybody listening, watching, whatever. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all of the fun stuff that you hear at the end of everything. Check out lamcowellness.com if you have any mental health issues. And again, thank you. We'll see you next time.